Good afternoon and welcome to Third Thursdays, our alumni conversation. This is the second of 4 for this year, this academic year, and we are delighted to have you join us either in person today or when you listen to this later online. Today we are departing from our normal pattern of featuring AMBS professors or programs, and today we are featuring alumni. And so I'm delighted to have with me Troy Osborne, who graduated from AMBS with an MA degree in 1998. He is Dean and Associate Professor of History at Conrad Grebel University College. And he also just recently published Radicals and Reformers, a survey of global Anabaptist history. And also John Sharp, who graduated from AMBS with an MDiv in 2005. He is retired history and Bible professor at Hesston College and also the former director of the Mennonite Church USA Historical Committee and Archives. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So we are going to focus today on the Anabaptism at 500 commemorations. And because both of you have been deeply involved with history, I'd be curious to have you start by just telling us, how did you first start getting interested in Anabaptist history? And how did that come about for you? Where, why, when, all of those things. So, Troy, do you want to start us with that question?
Sure. I'm hearing my voice echo in my head.
For us, your sound is good.
Okay. Is my voice echoing for everybody or just in my earphones?
Nope.
Okay. All right. Well, go ahead. So I came to it through college, pretty much at Hesston College and Goshen College. I'm going to try it with Hesston College and Goshen College. I had great profs who taught classes in history, and then at Goshen, especially in Mennonite history. And then I did a practicum at Goshen College at the archives, which at that point were still on the campus. And I worked at Shipshewana at Meadowhof for about 3 years and ended up my time there as assistant manager. So I was kind of involved in it. And then eventually at AMBS, I took a class in Advanced Anabaptist Studies with Carl Koop, and he brought in C.J. Dick, who at that time was living in the community. And that class is the one that sort of convinced me that it was what I wanted to do. I went to seminary thinking I was going to study theology, but that class with Carl and C.J. is what made me decide that this is what I wanted to study, and especially the Dutch Anabaptist tradition. They really captured me at that point.
Thanks. And John?
Well, I can't remember a time when I was not interested in history. Going back to listening to my Amish grandfather tell stories when I was playing with wooden blocks and spools on the floor of their living room, his living room. It was Hesston College that introduced me to Anabaptism. In 1973, January, I did the study term in Europe, the Anabaptist study tour, with Tour Imagination. Jan Gleistein and Saul Yoder were the leaders of that. And I began to see things that, oh, so this is what they were trying to do back in my home community. It clicked with me, and I was hooked from the beginning.
And John, Troy has already said a bit about what happened to him at AMBS, but how about you? How did your studies at AMBS impact your interest in Anabaptist history?
Oh, it just increased it. Took a course with C.J. Dick, of course, Anabaptist history and theology, and that underscored my interest and just added to my interest in Anabaptist history. And I knew earlier on that I was hooked, and this was a privilege to hear from and to study with CJ.
And do either of you remember any of the events or people that you wrote papers on or studied specifically while you were in seminary?
Yes. I was there under the old dispensation with teachers like Millard Lind and Howard Charles and even J.C. Wenger. I recall the course Pentateuch with Millard Lind, and I described that course often since then as though I were standing inside the barn and the big barn doors on the barn hill opened up and I saw a world I had never seen before. And I just loved Hebrew and Hebrew history.
Yeah. And Troy,
Of course, J.C. Wenger was walked into the classroom, Mennonite theology, and he looked shocked because we were in the basement of the seminary chapel, and he came in and said, "There's so many of you. Somebody must have heard I was going to kick the bucket or something." Well, and I was there precisely to take any course that he was teaching just so I'd have the experience. And then Howard Charles, Jake Elias, Jake Enns, all significant professors for me.
Wonderful. And Troy, was there any particular Anabaptist person or event that you wrote about while you were in seminary or studied more detailed?
Yeah, in the class I was taking, the assignment that I was given by Carl was to read one of the martyrologies that were held in the Mennonite Historical Library. And so I wrote an in-depth analysis of that historiography or that martyrology. And what was great about it is that I got to hold the book in my hands. And that was sort of, it wasn't just this abstract thing. It was a 400-year-old martyrology that I got to use and hold and look at. Yeah.
Amazing.
And I had lots of other great courses too, but yes, by Anabaptist, I would say that was the one.
And Troy, we are getting some feedback now, so not sure.
Okay. I wonder if John mutes himself when I talk.
Yes, Janeen and John, if you mute, it will be better.
Okay. Oh, it's still going on here.
Still.
I can type all my answers in. That helps. Oh, no, that's better. Nope. That's just.
It just started this
Okay.
last time you answered. So, all right. The second question that I want to ask you about is, how have you been part of the Anabaptism at 500 commemorations? So, John, why don't you start? And Troy, check to see if you have two different sound sources on. Yeah, okay. John, why don't you start with that? How have you been part of Anabaptism at 500 commemorations?
Well, I planned a tour with Tour Imagination that I lead for to coincide with the celebration on May 29. Before that, I was in touch with people like Peter Schmidt, who with his committee arranged lodging for anybody who needed lodging in homes. And it was just a tremendous mark of hospitality. I was so impressed by their going to great lengths to accommodate Anabaptist descendants who would be attending. So then, of course, being there was amazing to see so many people at one place interested in this 500th anniversary of Anabaptism. And it was good to feel like, hey, this is thriving. We're not losing anything here. We are adding more enthusiasm.
So you had one tour during that event in May, and
Yes.
you've been doing other tours this year. Have those also connected to the 500th anniversary in some way?
only in my commentary when we were in Zurich with my other tours. So it's a major reference point. And it's encouraging to have that kind of reference, that kind of a major event to focus on our Anabaptist history.
And Troy, tell us about how you've been connected to the events of this year.
We had a celebration. We had a celebration service here in January that we hosted for the community, but also all the members of the Mennonite Historical Societies of Canada were in town. And then I've been preaching at lots of congregations in the area, and as well as I'm gonna maybe I'll log off and log back on, so I'll see what's going on. I sound like the voice of the angels here, but
All right, we'll give him a chance to try this again. John, when you have been doing these tours, are more people interested in going because of the 500 year, or have you noticed a difference in how many people wanted to be in these beginning places this year?
Yeah. There was a lot of interest, and my tour sold out very early. So that expressed the level of interest. So there was more this year, but there is always a full tour of people ready to go, wanting to hear this story, wanting to discuss its implications. So it's been a delight.
And I understand there were also a number of, or more people from different European conferences that wanted to participate this year than what they expected.
Yes, and certainly more people, period. I remember the moment when John Roth had to announce to all of us still in the gateway that there were no more seats. He was sorry, but they couldn't accommodate anybody else. And I was glad at that moment that it wasn't me who had to make that announcement, but we all understood.
Yeah, yeah. All right, Troy, welcome back. Let's see if this, if your sound issues are better.
I think it should be better because I did have multiple versions of Zoom going.
Okay,
So
great.
from our tech setup. So
All right, go ahead and tell us again what you've been up to this year.
yeah, we've been really busy here with it at Grebel. I mean, the name of the college is Conrad Grebel, so we decided to push the boat out a bit. So we had a really great worship service near January 21st that we put together, and then we've been doing lots of sermons in the area, doing some teaching. So my colleague is David Neufeld, who's a historian of Swiss Anabaptism. So he and I together have been doing a lot of outreach. Then I led a tour with David we called it Grebel Alumni and Friends, and he and I led it from Amsterdam down the Rhine into Switzerland, where it culminated at the service that John was talking about. And that was a tremendously meaningful thing for everybody on the tour. Feel really fortunate to have made that connection with everybody and all the sites there. And then in the fall, I've taught a course at MC Saskatoon on 500 years of Mennonite history, and have continued to just churches still want to talk about it. So it's been a really full year and lots of interest in it. It's been really exciting, more just than I kind of expected, I'll say. So it's been really richly rewarding here.
And Troy, did you also time the release of your book to come out this year? I thought you did, but
yeah, that would not be me. That would be the editors. And they said,
okay.
you have a hard deadline, Troy, because they wanted it to come out as part of it's part of the Anabaptism at 500 series. And so when we started talking about it 11 years ago, we thought it would be a piece of cake to get it done in time, but it did take me a long time to get it done. And I was really glad that it was able to come out. It came out in 2024. So it was definitely timed as part of that celebration.
And for the folks who haven't had a chance yet to read it, can you give us a brief outline of it?
Yeah, it is. The task I was given by Herald Press, Menno Media, was to write a new kind of college, university level, seminary level textbook. They wanted it to be all 500 years, and they wanted it to include the global history of the movement too. And so that's what I tried to do. They also really stressed that it had to be readable, it had to be usable by students. And like I still think CJ's book is great, but it kind of has, it's a bit of an encyclopedic feel to it that he tries to include everybody in it, and students just get overwhelmed with the details in there. So we really worked hard at kind of crafting it in a way that would be really approachable to students who don't come with a lot of background in, not even just no background in church history, but increasingly students are coming with no background in Christianity or history. So we wanted to say, what if we started with no assumption of anything and tried to offer it? So I had a group of really good editors who helped me out with it and gave me advice, and students used it in Bethel and at CMU, Canadian Mennonite University. And so I had lots of student feedback on it as it was developed. Yeah.
And we used it at AMBS this
Oh,
spring.
great. Oh, you used it in the spring. Okay, the finished version.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah.
The Global Anabaptist History and Theology
Okay.
course used it, and I was auditing that course actually.
Okay.
So, and I noticed that you gave a pretty rich background to what was happening before the Reformation and how Anabaptism drew from some of those medieval sources. I also appreciated the way you drew in materials from the Global Mennonite History series that Mennonite World Conference had done that series earlier?
Yeah, I think they published it, but there was I mean, it was edited by John Lapp, and I think Arnold Snyder edited that series. That was a tremendously invaluable resource. And the thing I liked about that too is that the chapters were all written by local experts, often historians, but sometimes just pastors or people who had access to archives. And there's no way I could have done that book without it, because I'm trained in 16th, 17th century history and European history. And so I had to learn a lot of the history, a lot of the world for it. I couldn't have done it without the hard work of others. And then, because I did think about the Catholic history, the legacy, because I am very aware of the conversations that have gone on between Mennonites and Lutherans, Mennonites and Catholics, and trying to tell that story in a way that does not portray them as opposition. I think that was one of the things I wanted to do when I wrote the book as
Well, it's a
well.
rather remarkable accomplishment, Troy.
Oh, thanks, John.
5 centuries and 5 continents.
Yeah. Yeah, I doubted myself at some point. It did take about 10 times longer than I said it would, and I doubted myself a lot in the way, but it felt good by the end. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and you've raised a really interesting point, Troy, about how we relate to the other church traditions that are part of this story. And one of the things that I've been really careful as I've gone out preaching this year, especially on Gelassenheit. That's a sermon I had available, and people wanted to use it this year because of the plans. But I've been really careful to talk about this as being a commemoration of 500 years, not a celebration of 500 years. And I'm wondering if the two of you would just reflect on that a little bit as you interact with members of the other faith traditions that are part of this story. How do we reframe that story as not a us against them kind of thing? I don't know who wants to start, but
Go
Well,
ahead,
I
John.
think Troy helps us do that with his book. But also, we're not celebrating a new beginning or a division from other traditions, but we're entering into a conversation. We have this broader context. And if we can see it as a commemoration with its successes and flaws, it's easier to tell that story in relation to other traditions, especially the Reformed tradition.
Yeah, I would just echo that they were very careful. The Mennonite World Conference, they were very careful how they framed the service. And I did not get in the church either, but my takeaway was that it was a tremendously powerful moment of Christian unity and Christian remembrance of these different leaders from different ecumenical groups, different churches getting together and celebrating, well, not celebrating, commemorating the start of Anabaptism 500 years. But and commemoration sounds dour, but it was a joyful event. There was lots to be gratitude for there too, but it's an important thing. And I think here's where I was going. The takeaway from that is that it was forward looking and saying, like, in the future we have more to gain by working together as we enter this, and especially in the West, a post-Christian world where it's the truth of the Christian story that's going to matter more than our individual slice of it, I think. So that was a really strong takeaway. And that's the theme of Mennonite World Conference going forward, is do something courageous. And that was kudos to whoever was working on that.
The courage to love, I think, was a very powerful theme.
Yeah.
And it has all kinds of implications with how we relate to other traditions, how we relate to each other. It was a powerful theme.
And John, I'm
Because it does
curious.
take courage.
Yeah. John, when you are visiting a site where someone was martyred or someone was imprisoned, how do you tell that story in a way that doesn't perpetuate the us against them with the other groups involved?
Well, two things. I also talk about why Anabaptism was such a threat to the Reformed tradition and its renewal. The other thing I do at the Felix Manz marker is tell the story of the drowning of Felix Manz in 1527. But then I also follow that up by talking about the Steps to Reformation or Reconciliation Conference in 2004, when that marker was placed there, and talk about how the Reformed Church just opened up their arms to us and to our story. And it was just remarkable.
And Troy, as you are teaching, how do these issues come out in your class, your courses?
How do we, yeah, I mean, it's just not my instinct is to portray them kind of a hagiographic instinct. So it kind of comes natural to it. Because there's lots of stories of people getting it wrong throughout the church and throughout the Bible. And so it's pretty easy to come at it with an attitude of humility. And I think that's the approach I would take, is that it's one part of a bigger story. And that includes Catholics and Lutherans and Reformed. I mean, there's some great illustrations of that too. A bunch of us in Switzerland walked up to one of the Anabaptist caves, and at the base of it though was the members of the Reformed Church handing out walking sticks and giving us fruit and chocolate to get us on the journey. And it's like it's hard to then go up there and talk about persecution and the world hated us, but that's clearly not the story now. Without wanting to diminish the suffering of the past, but also it's a continuing story and one that continues to change and how it's told. Yeah.
Wow.
And it's important to recognize that the Anabaptists didn't invent every idea. They learned from Ulrich Zwingli. I once did a paper at AMBS on the Lord's Supper, the Eucharist, and everything that Conrad Grebel wrote about to Thomas Müntzer in 1524 had come from Zwingli. So we got everything from Ulrich Zwingli. We just parted ways when the impatient Anabaptist said, we got to change this now.
Yeah. All right. I want to shift gears just a bit here. AMBS is serving more and more students from the global Anabaptist family. What counsel would you give the seminary about how to teach Anabaptist Mennonite history in ways that engage the global church?
I mean, partly I think you get my sense is knowing who teaches your courses is that you're already doing it, because I know that would be Jamie's approach pretty much. Well, I think you talk about one of the things when I talk about is you can talk about multiple Anabaptist beginnings, multiple beginnings of the movements. There are beginnings that happen without missionaries church planting it. The case that I always think about is one of my students in my class, Hyung-Jung Kim, is from South Korea. And he is very clear that he's an Anabaptist, but not a Mennonite, because they read the Bible, they studied the Bible for a vision of Christian discipleship that spoke to them. And it ended up being one that felt like the Anabaptist movement, and they reached out to Anabaptist churches. And so that's an Anabaptist beginning that doesn't stem out of a European settler or a European missionary settling in. So that's the story that's always, so Kyung Jim would say, I am not a Mennonite, I am an Anabaptist. And I think about that a lot. I also hear stories too from the global South about they do find the stories of the origins impactful. Like they do find that to be a moving story as well. And they get a lot, especially if they're churches who are being persecuted, they find those stories very powerful and helpful for them. So I don't want to totally say we can't be embarrassed of that story and not tell that part of the story, but I think you do it sensitively. But I also think that you can reach out to the global church and ask what they want. I mean, I mean, I don't want to speak in characteristics, but I know that they're really curious about the works of the Holy Spirit, right? And there's lots in the beginning of the Anabaptist movement it's almost a spiritual revival movement. And
Yep.
they're fully believe that's the power of the Holy Spirit that's making everything possible. And I think that telling that aspect of the story could be one way to connect with the global church.
I think the Global Mennonite History Project helps us with that. And of course, your book, Troy, includes those kinds of stories. That gives us a point of departure. It also reminds me of a story that John Ruth used to tell me, that when Ethiopians became Mennonite, they wanted to know about Mennonite history or Anabaptist history. And as I recall, the current administrator of EMM said, you don't want to hear our history. It's a bad history. And the Ethiopian said wisely, bad history is better than no history. So he had to come back for Paul Grebel, who didn't think history would be worth telling.
Huh. And John, have you experienced the same kind of thing Troy is talking about with people from the global South engaging you and being excited to talk about their own beginnings and how they found Anabaptism?
Yeah. Maybe I'll tell the story about my second conversion, as I've called it. I was in LA teaching a group of pastors in training in Anabaptist history. My lecture was something about the North Germans and the Dutch. And I don't think it was inspiring, but something happened there. And there was like a renewal movement in that room. And I invited them to read Mendel Simon's key verse, 1 Corinthians 3:11, in their native languages. There were 9 languages represented there. And they helped renew me in a new understanding of how this story works in many places.
Yeah, thank you. So I have one more prepared question, and while I'm doing that, I want to invite those of you who are here on the webinar to type any questions or comments you might have into the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Although Faven, I'm not sure if I'm seeing Q&A, so if you can make sure there's a Q&A option for people to do. Oh, there it is. There's Q&A. Okay, so.
Can I add one more thing to, go ahead.
Yes, certainly. Go ahead.
I think another challenge too is to move away from a theology of beginnings, right? That's the story that gets the attention, and that's what we focus on. But the thing, I mean, John's example made me think about how we tell the story of the church beyond that first generation, the radical generation. And I think that's also a challenge too for me as a teacher, that I try and make that stuff interesting, because students get excited about the radicals and then they get less excited about people building churches and getting mortgages and things like that. So I think that to me is the one of the interesting theological and historiographical challenges, to just extend that story, as you say, before into the medieval church, but also to think about moving beyond a theology of beginnings. Sorry to interrupt.
And that's a great lead in to the last question I have prepared, which is, what are your 1 or 2 takeaways from the 500th anniversary of Anabaptism? And why does our history matter for the church today and or the church of the future?
It matters where we come from. It matters what stories we tell and how we tell those stories. Because ours is a story that is a human story. There are ups and downs, there are victories and failures. But if we can tell that with humility, as Troy mentioned a while ago, it will be helpful in our dialogue with each other and with other traditions.
Yeah, I think at a very basic level, thanks, John, for saying that. I think that it's hard for me to expand on that. I think at a basic level for me, I was just surprised at the continued interest. I mean, part of my instinct is always a bit of imposter syndrome and say, oh, no one cares about history. But there was a lot of interest in it in this area, especially. And it really was heartening to me. And so but your question actually was basically a sermon I've been preaching all year about why we as Christians are a history-formed people. That's the argument of the Bible, is that God acts in history and God intervenes in history. And the ultimate act is the Jesus story. And so, we say we're shaped by history, we're formed by history. And so but that history doesn't stop at the upper room. It keeps on going, and how we think about ourselves and how we've been formed, how we've been constrained, maybe questions that we haven't asked just because of the history that we have. So I hope people think it's important. And that's an argument I make with my students in my theology classes here, is that to study history is a theological act.
I too, as Troy has, had a lot of preaching and storytelling opportunities this year, and that continues into 2026. So again, it's an opportunity for us to tell the story, and we can talk about this grand event and the ecumenical experience that it was.
Okay, I'm going to add an extra question until we hear from the others who are here. And this is, I'm not sure I know quite how to phrase this, but part of the humility, part of the struggles that we have had as an Anabaptist tradition is linked to our beginnings, and that is the DNA that we seem to have of separating. And we see this continuing to happen in the current church, where when we don't agree with one another, we separate. And I don't know did either of you see the T-shirt that was poking fun at that this year? The Anabaptist Bowling League splitting since 1525.
Yes.
Which is kind of sad, but it's also, we can chuckle because we recognize that there's something there that's true. And so how can our history bring us together and counteract that kind of that history of splitting or that impulse toward separation when we don't agree? That's a tough question for me, but I'm curious if either of you have thought about that. How can history move us the other way towards coming together?
Yeah. Troy, you want to take a crack at it?
Well, there are also stories of people coming together too. I think
Yep.
I mean, there are stories. You look at the Dutch Mennonites, the Dutch Anabaptists, they had 16 groups by about 1580 and 1590. And usually the splits were over the severity of the discipline that they were supposed to put on people. But then they spent about 50 years looking for ways to come together and to work together. All the confessions of faith, that's the greatest period in Mennonite history of writing confessions of faith. And those were all to make it possible to come together. So they felt a drive to do that. So there are stories of people trying to overcome that division. There's efforts at overcoming the Amish Mennonite division in Europe. So there are stories that we could lift up as well to do that. And I think so. Just at a purely practical level, storytelling could do it, and to say that we also have a history of overcoming. The phrase of that is often the Taufer Krankheit, the Anabaptist sickness. But I think it's a Protestant thing, not just an Anabaptist thing. That the Bible doesn't always give you all the answers easily that everyone can agree on. But you can see faithfulness. People take it seriously, right? They're willing to take these things seriously. But I hope we can tell stories of people coming together as well.
Yeah, and we can. And history gives us perspective. In hindsight, we see that the issue that split a congregation 20 years later was no longer an issue. So hindsight and our storytelling can put our current context, our situation in a context.
Thank you. We have a question from Craig Cressman Anderson. Thank you, Craig. Please say more, if you can, about the ambiguity or difficulty of telling the story of Anabaptist beginnings while maintaining a charitable ecumenical spirit, not too quick to see history with undue good folks, bad folks, binary lenses. Thank you, Craig. So who would like to take that question?
Well, we can tell the story empathetically. We can tell the story about why this Anabaptist resurgence, not a resurgence, but a beginning, was such a threat to the authorities of the time. I mean, there were good reasons to try to shut these guys down. So we can tell that part of the story too. What was Ulrich Zwingli thinking when he did this? And the city council of Zurich made this decision, and why would that be? And what happened where? So, again, with a spirit of humility and a broad sense of history, we can incorporate multiple stories.
Yeah, you put the context in there and why people were choosing to do different things, and saying that the thing that perspective gives you is that everyone's trying to make the best decisions they can with the information they have. And maybe this is just me as a dean saying this, that sometimes people get it wrong, and perspective. Yeah, but the story, like if you look at more than, I think, especially moving more than just away from ideas too, like these are real people, these are humans, they making the best decisions they can. And I think it's the story is there to tell, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's kind of written into it itself. Yeah.
And I think the theme of the 500th celebration fits into this, the courage to love. Let's have the courage to love each other over our differences.
Any final words for us today? Anything that you wish I would have asked that I didn't?
I'm kind of curious how at AMBS you do with the question you asked us. How do you tell that story? How do you teach Mennonite Anabaptist history to, I know you're increasingly a global seminary. How do you tell that story?
Yeah, and I don't know that I know all of that answer, but I know it is a question that has been asked. Several of our students have pushed to make sure that that the telling of the story is connecting to the church as they have experienced it as well. But how all the details of how that's being done, I can't answer.
Fair enough.
I do know that in the Global Anabaptist Mennonite History and Theology class that I was in the spring, only 3 of the participants were North Americans, and the others came from 3 or 4 different countries. And so as I was engaging with their answers on Moodle, it was an online course, so we weren't talking to each other in real time, but we engaged each other's reflections. And I felt like I was gaining so much to understand how somebody from India or somebody from Ethiopia or wherever was reading this. John, any last thoughts?
Well, thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah.
The story keeps evolving, and we keep telling the story as you do at AMBS.
Well, thank you both so much for being part of this today, and thanks to all of you who joined us. We have 2 more Third Thursdays coming up. The next one is January 15th, and we'll be talking with Gilha Lee, who is a new faculty member in New Testament. As I was writing that, it was like a New Testament scholar. But we are really enjoying Gilha's presence in the AMBS community, and you'll get a chance to see why. He is a wonderful addition to our teaching faculty. So that will be January 15th. And I hope that many of you will be able to participate in the Pastors and Leaders Conference that's coming up in February. Remember that our special days of giving to AMBS are coming up soon. We appreciate all of your financial support. And if you watch, you'll see some fun videos that have just come out about the doubler who is going to double your gifts. So take a look at those and enjoy that, those chuckles as you watch our employees act out that wonderful gift that's been given to AMBS. And as always, I will say, if you know someone that you think should be considering seminary studies, please encourage them to do so and let us know who they are so that we can be in touch with them as well. So thank you all for being part of this today, and I wish you a wonderful rest of this this year and a good holiday season as well. And again, thank you, John and Troy, for being part of this today. It was wonderful to hear more about what you're doing. Blessings to all.
My pleasure. Thank you, and to you.
Bye-bye.